Hey, what are you up to? Nothing much, just about to buy an e-bike actually. I came across a crazy good deal actually. It's only 2 low payments of $29 and it could be mine, so isn't that crazy? You realize that that's probably a scam, right? Like e-bikes aren't that cheap. Nah, I don't think it's a scam. I think you're probably just jealous that I found it and you didn't, but okay. No, I'm not jealous. I just don't think that it's a good idea to... You just bought it, didn't you? Oh yeah, just purchased it. Should be coming on Wednesday. Oh no. Yeah, I think it's a scam. So in this video, I want to share with you the problem with cheap e-bikes. I've been testing out and reviewing e-bikes for a little while now on my channel, and I've got to see a lot of different products from very cheap to very expensive. And with all my experience reviewing e-bikes, I want to share with you the problems that I've ran into when I look at cheaper e-bikes so that hopefully you can avoid some of these or just know about them and be aware of the problem. And I'm not trying to say that every e-bike you come across that is cheap is a problem, but just in my experience, the majority of the e-bikes that I've reviewed that are under a certain dollar amount can just start to lack in quality. The first problem I see with most cheap e-bikes is the brakes. A lot of times they will have mechanical brakes with small rotors, and that is a recipe for poor braking power. This thing does not brake good at all. And when you're going really fast on an e-bike, up to 20 miles an hour, you want to be able to stop on a dime and you want to be able to stop smoothly. But with mechanical brakes paired with small rotors, it can just decrease your stopping time. I feel like this can be hazardous, especially on an e-bike traveling at fast speeds. And typically e-bikes are going to be heavier than normal bicycles, and with all that extra weight being carried forward, you definitely want brakes that are going to stop you in an ample amount of time. I typically prefer hydraulic brakes because they're a lot easier to squeeze with your hands and they stop the e-bike immediately, and that paired with a 160 millimeter rotor usually is a great baseline to have on an e-bike. When you start getting into heavier e-bikes, you'll see that they'll start to put in like a 4-piston brake to be able to stop it even faster and more efficiently, and they'll increase the rotor size to like 180 millimeters. So those are some things that you want to look at when you're choosing an e-bike. If it's really cheap, sometimes it means bad brakes. Another thing you'll usually see on a cheap e-bike is a smaller motor. I love riding on e-bikes that have at least a 500 watt motor or a 750 watt motor, depending on the e-bike style and what kind of e-bike it is. That usually is enough power to get you up hills with no problem at all and to just propel you forward at good paces. But sometimes on a cheaper e-bike, they're going to have a smaller motor. Maybe it's a 250 watt motor, maybe it's a 350 watt motor, or sometimes you'll even see a 500 watt motor, but sometimes they trick you a little bit with the wording because they're referring to 750 watt or 500 watt peak power instead of continuous power, versus nicer e-bikes are referring to their continuous power being 500 watts or 750 watts with a peak power that goes much higher. So you gotta understand a little bit of the lingo that they can trick you with, but usually on cheaper e-bikes they'll have a smaller motor. If you don't know what I mean by continuous or peak power means you can run the motor at that power all day long and it's going to be fine. It's going to have no issues at all and it won't overheat. But peak power means that the motor has the potential of going all the way up to the peak power that they say, but it can't sustain that. So maybe they'll use that peak power when they're going up a hill or you have a heavier load, but it won't be able to sustain that for long periods. So hopefully the hill declines and then you have back to smooth terrain. So that's something to know about peak power and continuous power. So pay attention to that when you're looking at a cheaper e-bike. Another area that's usually not as good on a cheap e-bike is the battery, because usually a better battery means a more expensive e-bike, and the longer range of a battery usually means a more expensive e-bike as well. So if you're getting a huge discount on the e-bike, then it might be because the battery isn't that well, so you're not going to get a long range out of it. And I feel like this is the whole purpose of getting an e-bike, is to use the power of the e-bike to propel you all around the neighborhood or to go get groceries or to go wherever you want to. But if your e-bike dies right away, then you just have a normal bicycle and have to go recharge your battery again. So I would pay attention to how long the battery life is on your e-bike. And not only do cheaper batteries sometimes mean less range, but also they can sometimes be not as safe. If you get into more expensive e-bikes, a lot of times they'll undergo a little more rigorous testing, and what you want to look for is a battery that is UL certified. This means that they've undergone testing and trials and just put it to the test to see how well their e-bikes hold up, and UL certified means it's going to be a little bit safer of a battery. Now I want to pause for a moment and let you know that this video is sponsored by Velotrick. They are one of my favorite brands of e-bikes, and they don't have that cheap of e-bikes, but they're not super outrageously expensive either. They actually produce some nice quality e-bikes for a reasonable rate in my opinion, and I am just a huge fan of it. I'm not reading a script or anything like that. These are my own honest thoughts. I really do enjoy this brand. Anytime we have family or friends come over, I always put them on a Velotrick e-bike because I know they'll have a great time on it. One of my very first e-bikes ever that I owned was a Velotrick e-bike, and it was absolutely a game changer for me getting into the e-bike space. I absolutely fell in love with it. I was able to travel so many more places and do so much more things and just have so much fun. And all their batteries are UL certified, so you know you're getting a safe battery, and they all have great range on them as well. So if you're interested in checking out any Velotrick products, I'll put a link in the description below for you to check them out for yourself. Something else that I'll see cheap e-bikes do is they'll oftentimes promote all their flashy features instead of actually the quality components of the e-bike. So what do I mean by this is sometimes they'll toss a rear rack on the e-bike that is cheap and flimsy and actually doesn't have a large weight capacity to it. Or sometimes you'll see that they'll throw in a headlight, but it's not that bright. Or they'll put in front suspension, but it's really springy and clunky and doesn't feel like a nice hydraulic front spring, so it really isn't that great for going over top of bumps to begin with. So a lot of times they'll like feature and showcase all these little amenities of their e-bikes instead of actually building a nice quality product. So you got to be watching out for that as well, because you might be thinking you're getting a crazy good deal because it comes with all these accessories, when in reality it's just kind of to hide the fact that they don't have a nice quality product. Something else I notice about cheap e-bikes is sometimes the shifters only go into like gear 6 instead of 7 or 8 or even 9 or higher. And what I notice about that is the pedals feel like they have less resistance in them because the flywheel down here has too many teeth in those gears. So instead of having only like a 12 or 11T, a bike like this might have 14T, which then it just makes it feel like there's less resistance in your pedals, and it makes your feet feel like they're rapidly swinging back and forth. Now this is my own personal opinion, but a lot of times if you can spend over $1,200 for an e-bike, you're gonna get a quality product. This can vary a little bit depending on the brand, and the price point can vary a little bit as well, but what I've noticed is over $1,200, a lot of times your e-bike will come with hydraulic brakes, so you'll have ample stopping power. It'll usually give you nice rotors on it as well. Usually the motor is going to be more powerful to assist the e-bike to go at faster speeds and to be able to climb hills. And something else I notice about the motor is on more expensive e-bikes, they usually have less of a lag time. On cheap e-bikes, sometimes you'll pedal and rotate the pedals like 4 times before the motor actually engages, and then it propels you forward all immediately, and it'll have a bunch of upfront torque. But with a more expensive motor, a lot of times it'll be a smoother, gradual takeoff, and it will give you immediate response and action. So you'll just notice a much smoother feel when you go for a ride versus a cheaper one. It can feel like jerky and just non-responsive, a little bit laggy, if you will. Something else I notice about a little bit more expensive e-bikes is that they're usually going to feel a lot smoother when you take them for rides. The suspension is a lot better. You're going to be able to go over top of bumps a lot smoother and easier. Usually the seat is a little more comfortable, and they usually give you a little bit better quality tires as well that are puncture resistant, so you don't have to change a flat tire as often as you would on a cheap e-bike that it's going to pop easily. To me, in my opinion, these things that I mentioned make for a great riding experience. All the extra accessories and added on bells and whistles can be nice, and they're kind of fun to have if your e-bike has lights on it or different things like that, but really those don't impact the actual riding experience as much. And so to me, that is the most important. You want to be able to enjoy going out for bike rides. You don't want to always feel like you're getting on this clunky e-bike with bad brakes and bad suspension, because that won't be enjoyable at all. But if your e-bike is a nice quality e-bike, you can always go out and buy accessories later if your e-bike doesn't have them, and usually they aren't that expensive to add on, like a rear rack or headlights or something like that. Nowadays, most e-bikes all come with headlights and different things, so it's not too big of a deal. So usually your more expensive e-bike will still include all those things, but if it doesn't, just know that the e-bike ride experience, in my opinion, is the most important part of your e-bike. Now, when it comes to cheap e-bikes, I will say this though, they are still a lot of fun. Even though they might not be the best quality, to me, any e-bike is better than no e-bike at all and just a regular bicycle. So I feel like you'll still have a blast on a very cheap e-bike, but it just might not be as safe or as comfortable of a ride, but it still can get you around and you can still have fun on it. So I just wanted to let you know that they still can be fun for their price. It is a value and people might not have the money for a more expensive one, but if you can, if you're already gonna be investing all that money anyways, you might as well just put in a couple extra bucks to get you something that's more premium of a product, and you'll be much more happier with it. Also, sometimes if it's your first e-bike ever and you get a cheap one, you might not even notice that it has all these poor quality parts on it, but once you make the switch to a more expensive one, or if you've ever tested out a more expensive e-bike, you'll clearly see the difference between the riding performance. So those are my thoughts about cheap e-bikes. Yes, they can be fun to ride on, and yes, they can be great if you're a beginner and just want to get a taste of what it's like to ride an e-bike. Sure, that could be absolutely a great reason to get one, but if you actually want to use this long term, I want you to consider all the things that I've mentioned in this video. So those are my thoughts on it. Hopefully this video is helpful. If you're interested in getting a nice premium product, then again, I want to mention that Velotrick is a great brand to buy from. I'll put a link in the description below for you to check them out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another one.